One morning, Minho stands by his office window, looking out over the city. His phone vibrates quietly on his desk. A number appears on the screen, a number he doesn't remember but recognizes immediately. He doesn't answer. An hour later, a text arrives. "I'm in town. Need to talk. Yumi." He doesn't answer this either, but he knows it's not a request. It's a fact. He arranges a meeting in a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop downtown, where no one knows him by sight. He arrives first, chooses a table by the wall, and sits facing the entrance. She enters precisely at the appointed time. Yumi. Time has hardly changed her. The same straight back, the same focused, clear gaze. She sees him, goes to the table, and easily and silently sits down opposite him. She doesn't smile. "Minho," she says simply. Her voice is quiet, even, emotionless. "Yumi," he nods in response. He doesn't ask why she came. He's waiting. The waiter brought her order. Green tea. She knew for sure he was already there, and that he had already ordered black coffee. She always knew everything. "You've changed," she says finally, taking a small sip. Her eyes search his face. "Time passes," Minho shrugs. "It's not about time. I've heard stories about you and about that woman and the girl. Is it true?" Minho's expression doesn't change, but his insides clench. His new life, so fragile and personal, has already reached rumors in his old world. "That's my business," he says firmly. "Your business has gotten weird," Yumi counters. "You didn't used to be distracted by other people's problems. You didn't used to have weaknesses." There's no malice in her words. There's a cold curiosity, and perhaps a hint of alarm. "It's not weakness." "Ease," he replies curtly. "In our world, it is weakness. Your enemies can see it. They already can. I came because I overheard a conversation. Someone took a great interest in your new life." Minho slowly sets his cup down on the saucer. The ringing seems very loud. "Who?" "It doesn't matter yet. What matters is that you've become visible. You've come out of the shadows. And now you're being watched," she says, taking another sip of tea. "Be careful, Minho. You've built something fragile around yourself, and fragile things are easy to break." She stands up, leaving the tea money on the table. "Was that a warning?" he asks, looking at her. "It was an observation," she corrects. "We're not enemies, but we're no longer allies. Goodbye, Minho." She leaves as quietly as she arrived. Minho sits alone, staring into his cold coffee. The sense of calm he's carefully cultivated all these weeks is cracking. The past has just walked through the door and sat at his table, and it clearly has no intention of leaving. The next morning, Amy runs to school in a special mood. Today, her class is presenting their Autumn City project at the school assembly. She's responsible for the model of their neighborhood, which they created as a class. She's proud and excited, but when she enters the classroom, she freezes in the doorway. A new girl stands by the teacher's desk. She's tall for her age, with perfectly styled blonde hair. She's not wearing a school uniform, but an elegant dress and a fashionable jacket. Everyone turns to look at her. Teacher Layla claps her hands. "Guys, meet our new girl, Arina Valiva. Let's be her good friends." Arina smiles easily and confidently at the class. Her gaze glides over the children, as if assessing them. She greets them in a quiet but clear voice. "Dad said this school has the best teachers. That's why I'm here," she says, and her words sound not like boasting, but a simple statement of fact, as if what her dad says is law. During recess, a group of children immediately gathers around Arina. She's got a brand new tablet, which she lets everyone look at. She hands out chocolates from Switzerland, which no one has ever seen before. She says she went on a helicopter ride with her dad over the weekend to see the mountains. Amy feels awkward. She's standing to the side with her old friend Lisa. They're watching the new star of the class. "Her dad is a very important person," Lisa whispers. "My mom told me so. He has a lot of clinics all over the city. He's even appeared on television." Amy nods silently. She doesn't want to approach. She feels a huge gap between herself and this self-assured girl. After class, Arina herself approaches Amy. "You're Ami, right? You're in charge of this model?" She nods at the cardboard construction Ami is carefully carrying. "Yes, we made it as a class," Amy replies quietly. "It's cute," Arina says, a hint of condescension in her voice. "Dad has special people making these in his office. They're much prettier." Amy blushes and doesn't know what to say. Arina smiles at her like an adult smiles at a child and turns away. That evening, Amy tells her mother about the new girl. "She's so different. She has everything, and she knows it." Kayla strokes her head. "The main thing is that she's a good person, Ami. Nothing else matters." But Amy senses what's important. For the first time, she feels so keenly that her blue dress from the last party is just a dress, and Arina probably has a whole closet of just like it, only better. The day of the project presentation arrives. Ami is very excited. Their model is the most complex, with paper trees and tiny lanterns. She is responsible for ensuring it reaches the assembly hall intact. Just before the performance, she places the model on a desk in an empty classroom to run and get some forgotten notes. She only escapes for a minute. When she returns, she freezes in horror. The model is lying on the floor, Someone has stepped on it. The cardboard houses are crumpled, the trees are broken, the little lanterns are crushed. All their work is destroyed. Irina emerges from around the corner of the corridor. She's holding the very same tablet. She looks at Amy and the broken model. "Oh," she says, without a trace of regret. "How careless! Someone must have accidentally hit it. Too bad." Amy can't utter a word. Tears well up in her throat. She knows this isn't an accident. She sees a cold, assessing glint in Irina's eyes. "What do we do now?" Irina asks. "You have a show in 10 minutes. Amy silently picks up the debris. Her hands are shaking. She runs into the assembly hall with a lump in her throat and a pile of rubble in her arms. Their class's performance is a disaster. Teacher Layla is upset, the children whisper among themselves, glancing at Amy. Irina sits in the front row, her back perfectly straight, looking at the stage. That evening, Kayla, seeing her daughter's tear-stained eyes, forces her to tell her everything. After listening, she frowns. "Are you sure it was her? Maybe it really was an accident." "I'm sure, Mom. She looked like that on purpose." Kayla sighs. She wants to call the teacher, but she's afraid she'll only make things worse if Ami's wrong. Just then, Minho arrives. As per their usual plan, he immediately sees that something is wrong. Ami, auditing. Ain Sueng tells him everything from the very beginning, about the new girl, about her rich dad, about the ruined model. Minho listens silently. His face turns stony. He doesn't interrupt. When Amy finishes, he asks just one question. "Valeva? Her last name is Valeva?" Amy, wiping away tears, nods. Minho slowly leans back in his chair. Everything falls into place in his head. Yumi, warning. One person has taken a great interest in your new life, and now his daughter, the most fragile part of his new life, is crying because of that person's daughter. Conflicts at school are not accidents. They are the first shot, and the shot is aimed very precisely at the most painful spot. "It'll be okay, Amy," he says quietly, but there's a steeliness to his voice she's never heard before. "It's not your problem anymore. It's my business now." At first, it seems like simple fatigue. Ami sits more often while others are running. Then she refuses a second helping of her favorite cake. Then at breakfast, her spoon begins to quietly clink against the edge of the plate. Her fingers are shaking. Kayla notices this immediately. First she coaxes, then insists, then almost forcibly takes her to the local clinic. And so begins the tour of offices. They sit in endless lines on plastic chairs. The air smells of medicine and old walls. Ami, usually lively and curious, silently stares at her phone, but even cartoons don't bring her joy. She seems small and huddled in her blue coat. The doctors are all different. The young general practitioner shrugs and mentions vitamin deficiency. The elderly pediatrician, with intelligent, tired eyes, spends a long time searching through a thick book, then writes out a referral for tests. A lot of tests. Blood from a finger, blood from a vein. Amy cries quietly, clutching her mother's hand. Then an ultrasound, where they move a transducer over her cold stomach. Then an electrocardiogram, where they attach cold suction cups to her body. Every morning now begins with a thermometer. Kayla keeps a notebook where she records Amy's temperature, what she ate, and how she slept. The pages quickly fill with numbers, but the picture remains unclear. The results come in piecemeal. Some values are normal. Others are slightly low or slightly elevated. Not a single doctor can provide any clear answers. The phrases are the same. "We're monitoring. We need to check." This could be a normal variant, but for Kayla, this isn't normal. She watches her daughter fade with each passing day. Amy stops laughing loudly. She climbs the stairs more slowly. Her hand in Kayla's feels lighter, as if there's less life in it. Minho practically lives in his car at this point. He drives them from one clinic to another, arranging unscheduled appointments through his old connections. But even his influence can't buy a clear diagnosis. He sees the same helplessness in the specialist's eyes, only hidden behind polite masks. One evening, after yet another visit to yet another luminary who was left in dismay, they were sitting in the car in the parking lot. Ami was asleep in the back seat, covered with her mother's jacket. Kayla stared silently out the dark window, a tear rolling down her cheek. She didn't even notice it. Minho doesn't know what to say. He's used to solving problems, but this one has no clear boundaries. It's like a fog that slowly but surely fills their lives, making everything gray and hopeless. Changmin shows up unannounced. He arrives at Minho's office late one evening, where he's sitting alone over a stack of printed medical reports. There's no coffee cup on his desk, no other sign of normal work. Just these papers. Changmin doesn't ask permission. He sits down in the chair opposite and silently looks at Minho. He's been his right hand for years. He knows him better than anyone, and now he sees in his eyes not a businesslike frown, but a different, far more dangerous feeling, a dull, helpless despair. "Is everything bad?" Changmin asks finally. Minho leans back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He looks tired. They don't know what's wrong with her. No one knows. They run tests, look at her, and shrug their shoulders. And what's the name? Is there a name for the illness? No. There are symptoms, weakness, weight loss, some strange blood counts, but the picture doesn't add up. Changmin nods. He's a strategic thinker, always is. So here, in this city, there's no answer. We need to keep looking. I've already called everyone I know, Minho says, and for the first time in years, something like weary frustration can be heard in his voice. Not in the country, Minho. Abroad. In Germany, in Switzerland, in Japan. There are clinics there that specialize in complex, rare cases. They're like medical detectives. They piece together the puzzle of symptoms when others give up. Minho stared at him. The idea was obvious, but he still clung to the hope that the solution was somewhere nearby. Do you have contacts? Not directly, but I have people who can find them. We need to gather all the medical records, all the images, all the tests, translate them into English, compile a detailed history, and send out requests, not just to one clinic, 10, 20, someone will respond. It's a plan. Clear, logical, but long-term. It doesn't offer immediate salvation, but it does provide direction, and that's better than sitting in a fog. Do it, Minho says, quietly but firmly. The familiar fire in his eyes flares again. The fire of action. Use any resources. Any. Money doesn't matter. Changmin nods briefly. He's already standing, mentally making a to-do list. I'll send you a list of clinics and doctors for approval within 2 days, he says, as he walks out of the office as quietly as he entered. Minho is left alone. He looks at the stack of papers. These aren't just reports of failures anymore. This is a dossier on a disease that needs to be caught, and he finally has a plan to do it. Work is in full swing. Changmin and his people are translating reams of medical documents. A perfect detailed letter outlining Ami's medical history is being compiled. It is being sent around the world. The first replies come quickly, polite, automatic. Thank you for your request. Your case is being processed. Then the responses from the doctors start coming in. Most are polite refusals. Unfortunately, this case doesn't fit our current research profile. We don't have the necessary diagnostic resources. We recommend contacting a specialized center, a name they've heard 100 times before. Some are asking for more information. Minho and Kayla, with renewed hope, rush from hospital to hospital, getting more detailed scans and tests. They send updates. Meanwhile, Amy is getting weaker. She now has trouble walking from her car to her front door. She sleeps a lot. A response comes from a well-known German clinic. They're willing to consider the case, but the waiting list for an initial consultation is 5 months. 5. Minho tries to pressure them, offering several times the usual fee. Oh my days. The receptionist on the other end of the line speaks with cold, impenetrable sympathy. We understand your situation, but the rules are the same for everyone. We can schedule you for February. It's late autumn. Minho hangs up the phone and clenches his fist so hard his knuckles turn white. He feels the walls closing in. Changmin brings the latest batch of responses. From Japan, the US, Singapore. The picture is the same. Either a refusal or a waiting list of months. Time, Changmin says curtly, looking out the window. It's catastrophically short, and bureaucracy everywhere is slow. Kayla doesn't cry that evening. She just sits in the kitchen, staring into space. Amy sleeps in her room under a warm blanket. Even though the radiators are hot, the silence in the apartment is thick, oppressive. Minho understands that all his connections, all his money, all his power in this new alien world are worthless. He can buy a car, an apartment, an entire company, but he can't buy a place in line for the fading girl. He can't buy the attention of the right doctor here and now. It was at that moment that he received his final letter. It wasn't from a foreign clinic. It was from the administration of a private medical center here in town. A center called Valeomed. The letter stated that they had reviewed Ami Valiva's medical history. There's a misspelling of her last name, but the gist is clear. And were ready to offer an urgent consultation with their leading specialist. Moreover, they had a research program specifically suited to such a complex case. Minho rereads the letter 3 times. He looks at the signature, at the logo. Valeomed, Mark Valiev's clinic, that same Arena's father. He feels like the trap he's been vaguely aware of since Yumi's visit, since the broken model has finally snapped shut. All roads have been deliberately blocked. Only one path remains, and it leads straight to his enemy. He slowly folds the letter. Time is no longer just their enemy. It has become a weapon in the hands of others, and he no longer has a choice. They are seen by the head physician of the Valeomed Center in his huge, almost silent office. His name is Dr. Semyonov. He has gray hair at the temples and very calm hands. He doesn't smile. On the table in front of him lies Ami's entire history, which they have spent so long compiling. Ami sits between Kayla and Mianho, small and pale. She seems even smaller in this huge chair. She squeezes her mother's hand. Dr. Semyonov speaks slowly, choosing clear words, but his voice sounds like cold metal. We've run our tests, and we've reinforced them with your analyses. The picture has finally come together. He pauses, looks at Amy, then at the adults. Amy has a very rare condition. It's because her body has stopped understanding its own cells correctly. It started fighting itself. It's not an infection. It's a systemic failure. Kayla freezes. Minho doesn't move, his gaze fixed on the doctor's lips. Is it treatable? Kayla asks quietly, her voice barely audible. It is treatable, but not here. Not in a regular hospital, and not with standard methods. The doctor turns his gaze to Minho. There's an experimental program. It's aimed at rebooting the immune system. It's complicated, expensive, and risky, but it's the only proven chance. Where? Minho asks simply. Here, the doctor replies just as simply. The program was developed and is overseen by our research institute. It operates exclusively at the Valiomed Center. We have the necessary equipment, the team, and the necessary permission to use it. Nowhere else in the country does this exist. A heavy silence hangs in the air. The doctor's words sound like a death sentence. There is salvation. It's the only one, and it lies in the hands of the man who hates Minho. What's the time frame? Minho asks, his voice even. Too even. The sooner the better. Every day counts. The preparation process will take time, but we need to start immediately. We're ready to admit Amy to the hospital on Monday. He stands, signaling the end of the appointment. His sympathy seems like a matter of technique, a matter of etiquette. As they emerge into the white, sparkling hallway, Kayla suddenly stops and leans against the wall. She's not crying. She's simply breathing heavily, staring into space. Amy wraps her arms around her waist and buries her face in her jacket. Minho looks at the Valiomed logo on the wall. Simple, stylish writing. It's more than just a name to him now. It's a wall. And behind that wall sits Mark Valiv, the man who just checkmated him. Changmin lives in a modern, yet minimalist apartment in the city center. When Minho rings the doorbell late at night, he opens it immediately, as if he's been awake and waiting. He's wearing sweatpants and a simple t-shirt. He silently steps back, letting Minho in. No questions. He leads him into the living room, where 2 glasses and a bottle of water are already on the low table. They sit down. They've made a diagnosis. Minho begins without preamble. He summarizes the situation. And they're the only ones with the treatment, Changmin states when Minho finishes. Only them. They need your approval by Monday. Changmin slowly pours water into glasses. The ice clinks. It's a trap, he says calmly, like he's talking about the weather. I know. They've been setting it up from the very beginning. School, illness, rejections from abroad. It all led to this. I understand that. Minho's voice is taut as a string. Changmin takes a sip of water and sets the glass down. So, this is the choice. Either you hand the girl over to the enemy, risking everything you have now, or you refuse and lose her forever. He looks at Minho. It's not a choice. It's surrender on his terms. Minho is silent. He looks out the dark window where the city lights reflect. He'll have conditions, Changmin continues. He won't just help. He'll want everything. Money, business, maybe even me, to cut off all your escape routes, to make you a nobody. What are you proposing? Minho asks, turning his face towards him. There's no fear or panic in his eyes, only cold, bottomless determination. Play his game, Changmin says quietly. Accept all the conditions. Give him what he asks for, and then stab him in the back. When he's sure he's won. They look at each other across the table. 20 years of shared journeys, dangers, and silent understandings lie between them. It's dangerous for you, Minho says. It's the only move, Changmin counters. He wants to crush you, take everything. So we'll give him everything he wants. We'll give him me, and I'll be his eyes and ears. And I'll find a way to break him from the inside. It's not an emotional outburst. It's a cold calculation, a strategy in which they both become bargaining chips. Are you sure? Minho asks one last time. Changmin doesn't answer right away. Then he nods, once, briefly and clearly. For Amy, and for you. There is no other way. They no longer speak. The deal is made. No handshakes, no vows. They simply sit in the silence of the night apartment, swallowing the bitter pill of future sacrifice. They have a plan, but its price is unimaginable. Mark Valev's office is on the top floor of a mirrored tower. Everything here screams money and power. Panoramic windows with views of the entire city, expensive dark wood furniture, and contemporary art on the walls that cost more than Kayla's entire house. Mark doesn't get up from his desk when Minho enters. He's leaning back in his leather chair, looking at him with a lazy, smug interest, as if he were a rare exhibit. Minho, he says, drawing out the name. How are you? Come in. Have a seat. Minho sits down in the chair opposite. He doesn't slouch, his face a stony mask. We both know why I'm here. State your terms, Minho says without preamble. Mark grins. He likes this directness. He likes that his enemy is cornered and forced to be honest with him. Frank, I respect that. Okay, let's be honest. He folds his hands on the table. We'll help the girl, of course. The best doctors, the best rooms, the gold standard program. Everything is paid for by the clinic. He pauses dramatically, savoring the moment. But generosity, my friend, must be reciprocated. So, 2 simple gestures on your part. First, that old electronics plant north of town. Your last major legal asset. I want a controlling stake, 51%. You sign the transfer papers. Minho doesn't blink. He's been expecting this. And secondly, your man, Changmin, a smart guy, a strategist. I need someone like that on my team. He's coming to me with all his knowledge of your affairs on a permanent basis. Now Mark leans back in his chair, his eyes shining. This is his signature move. He knows Changmin is more than just an employee. He knows he's practically a brother. You get the girl's treatment, and I get your business and your best friend. Fair enough, I think. The office is silent. From a bird's eye view, the city seems toy-like and silent. What if I refuse? Minho asks quietly. Mark spreads his hands in mock regret. Then I'm afraid our experimental program will suddenly encounter technical difficulties. The line, you see, is huge. The girl might not make it. Too bad. He's not threatening. He's simply stating a fact. His voice is filled with absolute confidence in his impunity. Minho looks him straight in the eyes. He sees triumph there, mixed with disdain. He rises slowly. Send the paperwork to the factory. Changmin will be waiting for your call. He doesn't wait for an answer. He turns and walks toward the exit. His steps echo clearly on the parquet floor. Minho, Mark calls from behind. Minho stops without turning around. A smart move. I always knew you were sentimental deep down, Mark says, his voice dripping with sweet, venomous victory. Minho doesn't answer. He simply walks out, quietly closing the heavy door behind him. The deal is done. He's just given the enemy everything he had in the pure world. But there's no brokenness in his retreating back. There's a cold, unwavering hardness. The first move has been made. Now the real game begins. Changmin arrives at Minho's office 20 minutes after his call. He doesn't know yet, but one look at Minho, and he realizes the worst has happened. Minho doesn't offer him a seat. He stands by the window, his back to the room. Mark has agreed to help. Amy's treatment will begin on Monday, he says without preamble. Changmin remains silent, waiting for him to continue. He knows this is only the beginning. His terms. He gets 51% of the plant. And he gets you! The silence in the office becomes deafening. Changmin doesn't move. At first, a wave of confusion crosses his face, as if he's heard the words but doesn't understand their meaning. Then understanding dawns, and his eyes flash with a cold, furious fire. What? It's not a question, but a low, strangled exhalation, full of disbelief. You're going to him, permanently. With everything you know, Minho says, turning to him. His face remains expressionless. The anger that flares in Changmin is almost palpable. You're giving me away? As a thing? After everything? His voice trembles with hurt and fury. 20 years side by side. Dangers, victories, silent understanding. And just like that, with one sentence at a cold auction, Minho's voice cracked for the first time, but he immediately regained his composure. It's the price. The price for her life. You yourself said there was no other way. I told you to find another way. I didn't say you should hand me over like waste material. Changmin steps forward, his fists clenched. They stand opposite each other like two enemies. The air is electric. It seems like another moment, and everything will collapse. But then something changes. The fury in Changmin's eyes doesn't fade, but something else begins to replace it. Sharp, cold logic. He sees Minho's face. He sees not betrayal, but absolute, impenetrable determination, and the torment he carefully hides. He remembers little Ami in the hospital. He understands. His shoulders slump slowly. His breathing evens out. The fire in his eyes fades, replaced by an icy, lifeless gleam. He nods, briefly and sharply. I see, he says, his voice empty of anything but emptiness. Then it must be so. When? Minho looks at him, seeing his anger give way to cool acceptance. He knows that at that very moment, Changmin was already starting to think about how to handle this situation. He'll call you tomorrow, Minho says more quietly. Technically, you're transferring to him. You'll get a position. Access. Changmin slowly approaches the table and sits down. His movements regain their usual precision. So this isn't just a transfer. It's infiltration, he states. Looking at Minho, there's no question in his voice. Yes, Minho replies, also sitting down. You will be his eyes and ears. You will learn everything you can about his schemes, about Valeomed, his weaknesses, everything that can break him. They no longer speak as boss and subordinate, but as two strategists planning a dangerous operation. He'll have expectations, Changmin says. He'll want me to start working against you right away, to prove my loyalty. I'll have to give him something, not critical, but convincing. Give it to him, Minho immediately agrees. Anything. Old schemes we no longer use. Contacts that no longer mean anything. So he'll believe it. Changmin nods, his brain already working at full speed. And you, Minho continues, will need to play a role. The role of someone who is betrayed and abandoned, who is angry with me, who now sees Mark as the new leader. It has to be convincing. It will be convincing, Changmin remarks dryly. A hint of that same anger flickers in his voice again, but now it's controlled, like an instrument. because part of it will be true. They look at each other. Between them lies a chasm of pain and unspoken words, but also a bridge of absolute trust. They both know this game could cost Changmin everything. If Mark suspects deception, the consequences will be dire. Changmin asks, "Until Amy is safe, until we find a way to get her out of his control, until we can strike him so hard he can't get up again," Minho says. There's no bloodthirstiness in his words. There's only a firm, unwavering purpose. Changmin stands up. "I'll start preparing, and I'll be in touch. But only if absolutely necessary. The less contact, the less risk." Minho stands up too. He wants to say something, to say thank you or sorry, but the words stick in his throat. Anything now would sound false and weak. Changmin sees this. He nods briefly, almost imperceptibly. It's the nod not of a subordinate, but of an ally, a partner, a brother in arms, in the most hopeless of battles. Then he turns and leaves without looking back. The door closes with a soft click. Minho is left alone. The sacrifice has been made. The game has begun. Now everything depends on the composure, patience, and loyalty of the one man who just pretended to be betrayed. The conference room in Valeomed's main office is overly spacious and overly brightly lit. It features a long table of dark polished wood. Besides Minho and Mark, 5 other people are seated at it. 2 of Mark's lawyers, a notary, and 2 of Minho's former partners from related projects. They were invited specifically to witness the fall. On the table lies a single folder containing documents regarding the transfer of 51% of the shares of the Northern Schemes plant. Next to it lies an expensive fountain pen. Mark sits at the head of the table, his jacket unbuttoned, with a slight, casual smile. He makes small talk with the lawyers, as if everything is a minor formality. Every now and then, he glances at Minho, who is silent, staring straight ahead. "So Minho, shall we get started?" Mark finally says, nodding toward the folder. Mark's lawyer opens it and begins monotonously reading out the key points. There are numbers and legal jargon, but the gist is clear to everyone in the room. Minho is voluntarily giving up control of his key asset. When the speech ends, all eyes turn to Minho. He slowly pulls the folder toward him. The rustling of paper seems deafeningly loud. He picks up a pen. It's cold and uncomfortably heavy in his hand. He signs his first signature, then a second, a third. Each time, the pen makes a dry scratching sound on the thick paper. He feels their eyes on him. His ex-partners don't look him in the eye. They study the grain of the wood on the table or their phones. They feel awkward, but they're there. Their presence is part of the humiliation. The notary silently takes the signed documents and stamps them. The sound of the stamp being pressed onto the paper sounds like a death sentence. "That's it," Mark announces cheerfully when the notary finishes. "Congratulations on our new partnership. It's a shame it's so one-sided." One of Minho's former partners, a man named Sergei, coughs uncertainly. "Minho, hope things will work this out for you and your family." He says this while looking away from Minho. Minho doesn't answer. He stands up. His chair slides back with a creak that cuts through the silence. He doesn't look at anyone, puts his pen on the table, and walks toward the exit. His footsteps echo loudly in the nearly empty room. "See you later, partner," Mark calls after him. But Minho is already out in the hallway, and the door slowly closes behind him, cutting off the laughter and quiet, subdued conversation that immediately begins behind him. The next day, in the same tower, but 1 floor below, Mark hosts a small reception. Valeomed's top managers, several key partners, and representatives from business publications are invited. The occasion is strengthening the company's strategic department. Changmin stands next to Mark in the center of the room. He's wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, which he appears to be wearing for the first time. His face is a polite, expressionless mask. He holds a glass of mineral water in his hand, but doesn't drink from it. Mark clinks his glass, calling for silence. "Friends, colleagues, today, our strong team is joined by a man whose strategic talents are renowned. Changmin. He will lead Valeomed's strategic development. I am confident that his experience and deep market knowledge will become our new competitive advantage." He claps Changmin on the shoulder. He bows his head slightly, a brief, dry smile touching his lips, and immediately disappearing. The applause is polite, quiet. The crowd is whispering. Everyone knows who Changmin is and where he came from. The looks they give him are a mixture of disdain, curiosity, and wariness. A traitor, a careerist, or simply a pragmatist who's gone over to the strongest. No one knows, but everyone's already judging him. A pair of bold managers approach Changmin. The conversation is short and strained. "We are glad to have you on the team," says one, clearly unsure of what else to say. "Thank you," replies Changmin monotonously. He doesn't engage in conversation. He simply stands there, like a rock, as waves of unnecessary words bounce off. He catches a glance across the hall. Minho appears in the doorway, in the shadows, for a second. He doesn't go inside. He just watches. Their gazes meet for a split second. There's no warmth or recognition in Changmin's eyes, only emptiness and detachment, the kind one would expect from someone who has changed masters. Minho turns and leaves without crossing the threshold. Changmin looks away and takes a small sip of water. His face betrays nothing, but the fingers gripping the crystal glass turn white with tension. Minho's office now feels too big and too quiet. The phone, which used to ring every 15 minutes, is silent. His email is empty, except for spam and automated notifications. He sits at his desk, staring at his computer screen. The stock price of his former plant is slowly but surely climbing. The market reacted well to the news of Valeomed's takeover. His own remaining assets, those 49%, are losing value. Business news portals have already published analytical articles, the collapse of the Minho Empire, and strategic defeat or the end of an era. He closes the browser. He tries calling an old contact, someone he worked on a project with 2 years ago. The man picks up, sounding unnaturally cheerful. Minho! Hi, how are you? I have a question about an old contract. You know, I'm in a rush right now. I'll call you back later for sure. And the connection is cut off. The call never comes. He goes to the restaurant where many of his circle usually ate breakfast. The waiter is polite, as always, but when Minho sits down at his usual table by the window, he notices several people at nearby tables suddenly fall silent. Then, avoiding eye contact, quickly pay and leave. 20 minutes later, the entire room is empty except for him. He arrives at the hospital that evening. Amy is feeling a little better today. She even smiled when he walked in. Kayla, sitting by the bed, looks at him with tired but warm eyes. Here, in this white room smelling of medicine, he is still needed. Here, he is still daddy. But when he leaves the room to buy some water, he sees the head doctor, Semyonov, walking down the hallway with 2 administrators. Seeing Minho, Semyonov's expression changes slightly. He nods formally and quickens his pace, continuing the conversation. Even here, in this medical world, which one would think would be immune to the echoes of his business failure, everything is already known, and now they avoid him. He returns to the empty office. He turns on the light. He sits in the chair. The silence weighs on his ears. He is an island. All around him is the sea, which yesterday was his path, but today has become an impassable obstacle. He has lost the battle, publicly and devastatingly, and now he must find the strength to wage war from deep underground, with only his will, Changmin's cunning somewhere out there in the enemy's lair, and the fragile life of the girl in the hospital as his only reason to continue. Of the Valeomid Center resembles not a hospital, but an expensive spaceship. Everything gleams with white and silver metal. The air doesn't smell of medicine. It smells almost nothing at all, only a light freshness, like after a thunderstorm. The profound silence is broken only by the soft hum of the machines and the soft footsteps of the nurses in their noiseless shoes. Amy enters the room. It looks more like a nice hotel room, a large bed, a flat-screen TV, even a small sofa for visitors. But instead of paintings on the walls, there are panels with buttons and screens. Instead of an openable window, there's a huge sealed display case with a view of the city. A nurse, a soft-spoken woman with warm hands, helps Amy change into hospital pajamas. They're soft, also white, with a barely visible hospital logo on the chest. Amy silently follows all the instructions. Her eyes are wide and frightened. She squeezes her mother's hand as a small monitor is attached to her arm, which will constantly monitor her pulse. Kayla tries to joke as she arranges Amina's toys on the nightstand, but her voice trembles. She, too, is frightened by this flawless, cold technology. Minho stands in the doorway. He's not allowed beyond a certain area in the gown they gave him. He feels alien and useless in this sterile world. He can only watch as his little girl is hooked up to the machines that will treat her. Everything will be fine, Commander, he tells Amy when the nurse finishes. His voice is a little louder than necessary, breaking the perfect silence of the room. Ami gives him a weak smile and nods, but her gaze says, I'm afraid. On the second day, as Kayla sits alone in the small family room next to her hospital room, trying to swallow tasteless hospital yogurt, Yumi appears at the door. She knocks lightly, already entering. She's wearing an elegant coat, and in her hands are not flowers, but a small basket of expensive dried fruits and nuts. For strength, the gift seems to say. Kayla? Yumi says. I'm Yumi. We haven't met. Kayla stands up, confused. She knows the name. Mino mentioned it briefly, as if it were part of a long-buried past. Hello. Are you here to see Amy? More towards you, Yumi corrects, carefully placing the basket on the table. Her gaze is quick, assessing, but not hostile. I know you're alone here, and I know what it's like to wait in a hospital with nothing you can do. She says this without much warmth, but also without falsehood. It's a statement of a shared, sad experience. Thank you, Kayla says hesitantly. This is unexpected. Minho doesn't know I'm here, and please don't tell him. It will raise unnecessary questions. Yumi sits down opposite her, still wearing her coat. The conversation is difficult. She asks about Amy's condition, nodding as she listens to the answers. Then, unexpectedly, she says, I've done some inquiries of my own, independently. Mark Valiev, his methods aren't always pure, not in medicine, but in business, in the way he removes obstacles. She looks directly at Kayla. Ami's illness. Are you absolutely sure it was an accident? Was there anything unusual before she got sick? At school? In her food? Kayla's stomach tightens. What are you trying to say? I'm trying to say that if this was a game, it didn't start with the factory agreement. It could have started much earlier. Look closely. Remember. Yumi stands up. Her visit had lasted no more than 10 minutes. I could be wrong. I hope so. But if you have any thoughts, any strange details, here's my number. Not through Minho. Directly. She leaves a plain white business card on the table. Then she nods and leaves, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and a heavy cloud of anxiety. Kayla stares at the business card for a long moment. Then she slowly puts it in the back pocket of her bag. Her heart is pounding. Is this really possible? The procedure is scheduled early in the morning. Amy is not allowed to eat. She is taken on a special bed to a ward where her parents are not allowed. They can only escort her to the heavy doors marked sterile area. No access. Amy's face is pale, but she's not crying. She just holds her mother's hand tightly until the very last moment. Then the door closes, and Kayla stands there, as if hoping it will open. Minho approaches silently and places his hand on her shoulder. She flinches, but doesn't pull away. They stand like that for a few minutes, then slowly walk away from the door. They have nowhere to go. Walking into the empty room is unbearable. Going for a walk, they don't have the strength. They find a small chapel in another wing of the building. It doesn't belong to any religion. Just a quiet room with soft pews, a few candles, and an abstract stained glass screen through which colored light pours. It's empty. They sit down on a bench at the very end. The silence here is different, not like a hospital. It's soft, enveloping. Kayla can't take it anymore. Yumi came, she says quietly into the silence. Minho slowly turns his head toward her. A momentary wariness flashes in his eyes. Why? Kayla talks. About the visit, about the questions, about the business card in her pocket. Her voice is broken. She's afraid it sounds like madness. She thinks Ami that it was not just a disease. Minho is silent for a long moment. He stares at the multicolored reflections on the floor. I've been thinking about that too, he finally says quietly. Too timely, too perfect. But thinking is one thing, but proving, what if she's right? Kayla whispers, horror evident in her voice. Then that changes everything. Minho replies, just as quietly, but there's nothing we can do right now. Right now, all we can do is wait and hope that that procedure out there, behind that door, will help her. He extends his hand, not to hug. He places it palm up on the bench between them. Kayla looks at his broad, strong palm, then slowly places hers on top. Her fingers are cold. His palm is warm and firm. They don't speak. They simply sit, holding hands in the tinted light of the quiet chapel, and wait. For the first time, they are more than just allies in misfortune. In this silence, in this waiting, they become a team, seemingly ready to do anything to protect their child, even if it means believing the worst. 2 days after the first procedure, an article appears in the business news. Not on the back page, but at the top. The headline is pithy and caustic. Businessman Minho's shady past, questions regarding the sources of his capital. The article makes no direct accusations, only hints, rhetorical questions, mentions of old, closed cases, of people from his past who had run-ins with the law. The phrase, according to informed sources, is repeated 5 times. The article masterfully creates the sense that something dirty and dangerous lurks behind the successful facade. The effect is immediate. The remaining partners, who were still hesitant, now turn off their phones completely. A call comes from the bank, where Minho has a line of credit for small remaining projects. A polite voice announces an unscheduled inspection and a temporary freeze on operations. Minho sees the article in the morning, on his phone in the hospital corridor. He reads it, and his face turns stony. He's not angry. He understands. This isn't just a low blow. This is a ritualistic destruction of his name. Mark is wiping his feet on him in the public square, knowing he can't respond. Not now, when Amy's life depends on the machines in his clinic. Kayla, seeing his face, quietly asks what happened. He simply shows her the headline. She reads it and turns pale. It's a lie, she whispers. Never mind, Minho replies hoarsely. It's true for everyone now. Changmin is perfect at the Valleomed office. He's quiet, efficient, and always precise. He studies all processes, delves into reports, and asks the right questions. He's a model new top manager. Mark initially watches him with suspicion, but gradually he begins to trust him. Changmin genuinely helps optimize several internal processes and offers clever solutions that save money. He demonstrates his loyalty by handing over old but still valuable market research to Mark, which he supposedly took with him. It's a small but convincing gesture. As a sign of trust, Changmin is given access to a closed server containing financial archives. Not everything, but a significant portion. Under the guise of analyzing financial risks from past years, he begins digging through old reports, contracts, and payment orders. That's where he finds what he's looking for. Not one large folder labeled crimes, but a chain of small, strange transactions. Transfers of small sums to shell companies, purchases of medical equipment at prices twice the market price from certain suppliers, dubious contracts for clinical trials for which there are no reports or results. He doesn't download files. That's too dangerous. He memorizes contract numbers, dates, and the names of intermediary firms. He notes inconsistencies in reports. He's not collecting incriminating evidence, but threads. A tangle that, if pulled, could begin to unravel the entire fabric. One evening, Mark, passing by his office, notices him still working. "You're working hard, Changmin. Glad you're with us." Changmin looks up from his monitor, his expression calm. "I want to understand all the processes from the inside, so I can be of maximum benefit." Mark nods with satisfaction and leaves. He's confident he's bought not only intelligence, but also dedication. The meeting takes place at dawn in an abandoned boat garage on the outskirts of town. Changmin chooses the location. Minho arrives first in an old, nondescript car lent to him by the last remaining loyal driver. Changmin appears precisely at the appointed time, on foot, from the other end. He's dressed simply in a dark windbreaker and a cap. They don't greet each other. They stand in a cold, dim room that smells of rust and old water. "Speak!" Minho is the first to break the silence. Changmin briefly, point by point, outlines what he's found. Contract numbers, company names, amounts, dates. His speech is monotonous, like a report. No emotion. It's the top brass. The system is rotten. He's inflating procurement prices, kicking back some of the money through shell companies. Some of the equipment may not be up to standard. There are suspicions of falsification of the results of some paid studies. Minho listens silently, absorbing the information. "Is that enough?" he asks when Changmin finishes. "No, these are just directions to strike. We need proof, papers, evidence. Right now, these are just numbers in an old database. He can easily disown them. What do you need? Access to more recent data, current operations, or an insider. Someone who's been working on these schemes and is willing to talk." Changmin looks at Minho. "I'll try to find someone like that, but it's a risk. If he suspects," Minho says immediately, "safety is more important. We still have some time while Amy is undergoing treatment." "Time is running out," Changmin corrects. He's confident of victory. His next move is to take everything from you, to completely push you out of the market. And then, he might find a way to make Amy's treatment dependent on something else. "We need to strike first." They fall silent again. In the distance, the city hums, beginning a new day. "How is she?" Changmin asks suddenly, his voice losing its metallic edge for the first time in the entire conversation. "She's holding up," Minho replies curtly. "The first procedure is over. We're waiting for the results." Changmin nods. Then he pulls a plain, unmarked envelope out of his inside pocket. "Here's what I remember. No explanation. Just the fact is, destroy it once you've studied it." Minho takes the envelope and tucks it inside his jacket. "Be careful." Changmin looks at him one last time, then turns and walks away the way he came, without looking back. Minho waits 5 minutes, then goes out to the car. The envelope burns his chest. This isn't victory. These are the first bullets before the decisive battle. And they were obtained by a man officially considered a traitor. Yumi doesn't believe in coincidences, especially not ones this perfect. She sits in an expensive hotel room, mentally juggling the facts like solitaire. The appearance of the enemy's daughter in Amy's class. Almost immediately, the start of the bullying. Then, a strange, inexplicable illness. And finally, the offer of a life-saving cure for this very enemy. Too smooth, too convenient. She calls an old acquaintance, a man who once worked in a pharmaceutical lab. The conversation is general, but she asks specific questions. Is it possible to induce specific symptoms resembling an autoimmune disease through external influences? By what means? How difficult is it? The answers don't reassure her. It turns out it's possible. Not only possible, but there are entire groups of substances that can trigger a malfunction in the immune system, especially in children. And traces of these substances disappear over time, making them difficult to detect during a standard examination. Yumi hangs up and stares out the window at the city at night. Her suspicions go from abstract to frighteningly concrete. She needs evidence, but how can she find it if the crime may have been committed weeks or even months ago? Yumi doesn't go to the police. She knows the tracks. if there were any, have already been thoroughly covered. She starts with the people. Mark Valev, like any strong businessman, made enemies. Disgruntled fired employees. Competitors he had unfairly sidelined. Through her networks, she finds several such people. She arranges meetings in quiet, discreet places. She doesn't intimidate them or promise money. She simply says, I want to understand what Mark Valev is capable of so I can stop him. One former purchasing manager, a man with tired eyes, describes constant pressure from above to buy consumables from certain companies at inflated prices. Another, a research fellow who was fired after a conflict, whispers about the flexible ethics in some of the clinic's research programs and how data was manipulated. But this is all about business, about greed. Yumi asks more cautiously, have they ever heard of pressure methods becoming personal? Threats to families? Harmful behavior? People shrug. No, never heard of that. Mark is tough, but smart. He wouldn't do something so risky without absolute certainty. And so, the third meeting. The woman, a former head nurse in the children's department of one of Valiomed's clinics. She left of her own accord 2 years ago, but her voice still rings with resentment. He never had anything to do with children, she says firmly. That was his personal red line. He said it was the only thing they wouldn't forgive. Even he has his rules. This statement makes Yumi freeze. So if Mark crossed this very line for Minho, then his hatred runs much deeper than it seems. Or he's absolutely certain of his impunity. And perhaps there's a way to make it impossible to prove guilt. She thanks the woman and leaves, taking with her a new thought. What we need isn't crude sabotage. We need a more elegant medical approach. Someone who can do it. A doctor, a lab technician, someone with access and knowledge. In Ami's room, even the machines seem to be kind to her, beeping more quietly. She's just undergone a second, more complex procedure. Her face is waxy white, her eyelids half closed. Kayla sits by the bed, stroking her hand. Mino stands against the wall, his gaze glued to the monitors where the green pulse and blood pressure curves dance. Suddenly, one of the sensors emitted a short, high-pitched sound. Not an alarm, but a question. The blood oxygen saturation indicator flickered slightly and began to creep downward. Ami moaned softly, her body trembling slightly. Ami? Baby girl? Kayla calls anxiously. The girl doesn't open her eyes. Her breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Mino steps forward, but at that moment, the doctor on duty enters the room with a brisk gait. His face is focused. He silently checks the readings, feeling Amy's pulse on her wrist. Reaction, he says curtly to the nurse who appears behind him. Prepare the drug from the backup protocol. The next 10 minutes stretch out into a painful stretch. The nurse administers the medication. The doctor doesn't move from the monitor. Kayla, pale, presses her hand to her mouth. Minho feels every muscle in his body tense to the limit. He can't breathe. On the monitor, the curve freezes at a low point, holds, and then slowly, hesitantly, begins to creep up, even higher, returns to normal. Ami's breathing evens out, deepens. She sighs softly and seems to be drifting into true sleep, not oblivion. The doctor wipes his forehead with the back of his hand. The crisis is over. That happens sometimes. The body is fighting back, but it pulled through. This can be considered a good sign. It means the therapy is working. The immune system has begun to respond. He says this in a tired but reassuring tone. Kayla sinks into a chair, her body shaking with silent sobs, from the fear she's just experienced, and from a wild, painful hope. Minho comes over and puts his hand on her shoulder. He looks at Amy. Her face is still pale, but no longer waxy. There's a hint of life in it. A breakthrough? Yes, but it's not a joyful breakthrough. It's a breakthrough through a wall of pain and fear that cost the girl and all of them several years of their lives. They won this round, but the war continues. And somewhere out there, in the shadows, Changmin searches for weapons, and Yumi digs into the past, trying to find the beginning of this war. And they all understand that the next crisis may not be medical. Yumi comes to the hospital again, but this time her face isn't a mask of politeness, but a marble slab carved with cold fury. She doesn't bring any fruit. In her hands is a plain, stiff envelope. Kayla, we need to talk. Just us, she says, her tone leaving no room for argument. They walk out into the same family room. Yumi closes the door and places the envelope on the table. I found it. Not evidence for the court, but clues for us. She pulls several sheets of paper from the envelope, printouts of old invoices, a list of chemicals, a photo of the school's kitchen. Before Amy got sick, they were repairing the ventilation system in the cafeteria at her school. The contractor was EcoClimate. It's 70% owned by Valev Holding. Kayla stares at the papers, confused. What does that mean? It means they had access. Here's a list of the chemicals they use to clean the air ducts. Standard ones. Except for one. Yumi points to a line with an obscure name. This chemical is harmless in its pure form, but at certain temperatures and humidity levels, which were exactly what was in that old system, it can form volatile compounds. Rare. They're rarely tested for, and in children with weakened immune systems or predispositions, they can cause a chain reaction. Symptoms very similar to what Amy had. Kayla feels the floor give way beneath her feet. She grabs the edge of the table. You're saying they deliberately poisoned her? I'm saying they created the conditions, like putting a match under dry straw. The disease was already inside her, dormant, or it flared up on its own. They didn't shoot. They simply opened the window into the freezing cold, knowing she had a cold. And technically, they're not at fault. But the intent was there. Yumi puts the papers back. This reagent has a short decay period. There are no traces to be found now. It's the perfect weapon. But I know the person who prepared this estimate. He remembers an unusual order for a special cleaner above the standard. He's afraid, but he can confirm it. Kayla stares at the envelope as if it were a poisonous snake. Her entire maternal essence screams with horror and impotent rage. Why are you telling me this? What can I do? Nothing yet, Yumi replies coldly, but you need to know. So you understand who you're dealing with, so that when the time comes to act, your hand won't tremble. Keep this. And wait. Minho learns this that evening when he arrives at the hospital. Kayla, pale as a sheet, pushes him into an empty linen closet and, choking with tears and anger, blurts out everything she heard from Yumi, pointing her finger at the sheets of paper she left for her. At first, Minho's face is blank. Then, slowly, it darkens. His eyes become narrow slits, with black lights dancing in them. His jaw is clenched so tightly, the ridges of muscle on his cheekbones are visible. He doesn't scream. He doesn't even move. But such a wave of cold, silent rage begins to emanate from him that Kayla becomes physically afraid. She's seen him angry before, but this is different. This is a primal, murderous rage, unchecked by any rationality. Where is he? His voice is hoarse, like the scraping of stone. Where is he? He doesn't raise his voice, but every sound cuts the air like a blade. She understands he's asking about Mark. He's going to walk out of here and do something irreversible. He's going to go and simply kill him, and that's it. Amy's treatment, their plan, everything will collapse. At that moment, his phone buzzes in his pocket. Once, a short text message. Minho instinctively, without looking, takes it out to throw it, but his gaze catches on the screen. Just 2 words from an unknown number. Not now. This is Changmin. This is their prearranged signal of extreme danger and a demand to stop. Minho freezes. He looks at the text, then at Kayla, then back at the text. A shudder of rage still ripples through him, but his mind, bound by an iron will, slowly, with monstrous effort, begins to take over. He takes a sharp, deep breath, as if he can't breathe. Then another. He's right, he manages to squeeze out. His voice is still hoarse, but there's already a hint of control in it. If I go to him now, they'll stop the treatment immediately. Accuse me of threats. That's what he's waiting for. He wants me to snap. He squeezes the phone so hard the glass cracks. Then, slowly, very slowly, he releases his grip. He looks up at Kayla, the rage still lingering in his eyes, but already subdued by a monstrous effort of will. But he's going to die. After all this, he's going to die. I promise him that. The next day, Minho doesn't show up at the hospital. He sends Kayla a short message. Business. I'll be there tonight. He's not lying. He has things to do now, the most important things in his life. He drives to an abandoned auto repair shop on the outskirts, where he once started his first legitimate business. The guard, an old man named Boris, who remembers him as a boy, silently opens the gate. Minho descends into the dusty basement, where an old safe sits, unopened for 5 years. There's no money inside. There are old notebooks with phone numbers, not the ones in his smartphone, the ones that remember his old life, the numbers of people who aren't afraid of Mark, his clinics, or his money, people who value duty, loyalty, and know how to work quietly. He calls the first number. The phone picks up. No greeting. This is Minho. I need your help. There's a pause, then a low voice. I thought you went into business. They kicked me out. They want to finish me off. And they hurt the child. No more explanation is needed. There's a knowing chuckle on the other end. What do you need? Information. On a person. Mark Valev? Everything. For the last 10 years. All his dirty deals. All his weak spots. Everyone who holds a grudge against him. And a quiet, unnoticed team. Observers, information disclosure specialists, for a few weeks. It will be expensive. Priceless, Minho says curtly. He calls 3 more numbers. Each time, the conversation is short, businesslike, and to the point. He doesn't ask, he sets a task, and he pays. He pays with the last of his secret, untouchable accounts, which remained intact even after the collapse of his legitimate business. By evening, he has a list, 4 names. Each one is a key to a specific part of Mark's empire. One is a former auditor who once handled Valiomed's affairs and left, keeping copies of some interesting reports. Another is a cybersecurity specialist who can quietly infiltrate places even Changming couldn't reach. The third is a man who knows everything about Mark's real estate and assets, including those registered to frontmen. The fourth is a shadow, a man who can discreetly follow anyone, anywhere. Minho meets with each of them individually, in neutral, secluded locations. He makes no secret of his goal, to destroy Mark Valev. Not just defeat him, destroy him to the ground. And to do this, they need not brute force, but precise, incontrovertible information. Stones from which to build a tombstone for his entire reputation and his empire. They listen, nod, and take the advance. No one asks too many questions. They're professionals. And they see something in Minho's eyes that compels them to agree. Not despair, but the cold, unwavering determination of a mountain that has moved and is now rolling to bury its enemy. Changmin transmits the data not at a meeting, but through an old, almost forgotten channel, a digital capsule, in an abandoned amusement park. Minho finds a flash drive hidden in the hollow of an old tree. It contains not only facts and figures, but also names, key names. Mark's chief accountant, who keeps double-entry bookkeeping, an equipment supplier who pays kickbacks, and even the name of a doctor who signed off on dubious research protocols. That same night, Minho assembles his new team in an empty warehouse. He lays out a plan on the table like a battle map. The attack must be simultaneous and from all sides, he says in a quiet, clear voice. First, leak information to regulatory agencies and the media, everything related to accounting and contracts. Second, cyber attack, disrupt their servers, website, and 24-hour record system. Create chaos. Third, physical pressure. Our people block the entrances to Valiumid's 3 main clinics, not by force, just technical problems with trucks and cars. Fourth, stocks. As soon as the first news comes out, our people on the stock exchange will start dumping their shares en masse. He looks at the assembled group. The goal isn't just to cause harm. The goal is to create a sense of utter collapse, so that everyone who works with Mark will panic and start saving themselves, so that their world will crumble in a single day. The team nods silently. The plan is risky, but precise, like a surgical incision. The attack begins at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. First, several major business publications publish articles detailing Valiomed's schemes. 15 minutes later, the clinic's website and internal network are hit by a powerful cyber attack. Instead of doctors' schedules, screens display chaotic numbers and error messages. By 10 o'clock in the morning, spontaneous traffic jams of broken-down trucks form in front of the main clinics. Ambulance sirens are blocked. People from the prosecutor's office and the tax office enter the main office building to conduct a search. Valiomid shares begin to fall on the stock exchange, slowly at first, then increasingly rapidly. By midday, they've lost a third of their value. Mark is in his office trying to control something, but the phones are ringing off the hook with panicked calls. His face turns purple with impotent rage. He realizes it's Minho, and he realizes he's lost. He tries to escape. He goes down to the underground parking garage and gets into his car, but as he pulls out, a black SUV blocks his path. Minho gets out, alone, unarmed. Mark stops and rolls down the window. His face is distorted with hatred. "You've lost everything, Minho. I will destroy you." "You're already destroyed," Minho answers calmly. "Your empire is dust. Your name is dirt. And I just came to watch." Flashing lights emerge from around the corner. Uniformed men approach them. "Mark Valev, you'll be detained for questioning." Mark is led out of the car. He's pale and trembling. As he passes Minho, he tries to say something, but can't find the words. Minho looks him in the eyes and nods slowly, almost imperceptibly. This isn't a celebration. It's a statement of fact. The trial is over. A month passes. Mark is in custody, his case being reviewed by investigators. Valiomed's shares have been bought by competitors, and the clinics are under new management. Ami's treatment, already begun, is being continued by new doctors using the same protocols, and it's yielding results. Amy is discharged home. She's still weak, but there's light in her eyes again. She can walk through the park, holding Minho's hand. Minho's factory is slowly being brought back under his control through complex legalist procedures. It will take months, but the path is clear. Changmin officially resigns from the remains of Valeomed and comes to Minho's empty office. They don't hug, they simply nod. Everything is said without words. Yumi is packing her suitcase at the hotel. Her mission is accomplished. She's standing by the window when there's a knock. Kayla and Amy are standing on the threshold. "I came to say thank you," Kayla says, "and to ask. Don't leave." Yumi looks at them silently. "We don't have a family, but we have a tribe now, and there's a place for you in it," Kayla says quietly but firmly. Yumi looks at Amy, who smiles at her with her weak but sincere smile. Then she nods. Once, that evening, they all gather at Kayla's apartment around a large table. Minho, Kayla, Ami, Changmin, and Yumi. There's simple food on the table. No one talks about the past. No one makes plans for the future. They just sit. Ami laughs at something stupid, and her laughter sounds like the most precious thing in the world. Changmin and Yumi exchange a few dry, businesslike remarks. Kayla pours tea. Minho looks at them all. They're not family. Family is about blood and a shared past. They don't have that. What they have is a shared scorched field they've walked through. There's a trust forged in fire. There's a silent vow to protect this fragile, newborn world around this table. And perhaps it's even more than family. It's a union, and no one will ever break it.